right, well, I am not Andrew, in case you were concerned. Andrew is at home with his family, and they are just getting used to life with a third human. And there's three of us that will be speaking for the next 3 weeks, and we are super excited to give the gift to our pastor of having to just be able to welcome his new son into his family. And so that is why I am here this morning. So we were all asked to talk about something that was on our heart. And as I was thinking about it, I was like, I am coming up blank. So in the words of Ryan Westfall, I'm taking the easy way out today. I'm going to give you my testimony this morning. So I hope that you don't think that's the easy way out, but I guess time will tell, right? So now, if anybody falls asleep this morning while I'm talking, I'm going to take it personally, okay? So please don't fall asleep. I'm also going to apologize in advance. This is super personal to me. This is my story. So one, I am super nervous because this is like, hey, why don't you come hang out in that closet I have that has all my dirty, hidden things. So please give me patience in that. Two, it's emotional. I ran through it this morning and was crying so hard at one point. I was like, Beth, get it together. You can't do this. So please have a little patience for me. This is pretty personal. So I start my story with this. My parents are here today. They're Mike and Jeannie Schuler. I have two of the most amazing parents in the whole world. And I think that, and lots of other people do too. So, but this is the cool thing about the way I grew up in life. My parents gave their life to Christ a few years before I was born. And when they gave their life to Christ, it transformed every part of who they were. They didn't just go to church, they loved church. They didn't just read the Bible, they dove into the Bible. And so I grew up in this environment where my parents didn't just like Jesus and didn't just go to church, they loved Jesus. In fact, they were so on fire for Jesus that my grandpa, who was not a Christian at the time, told them that they could come over, but Jesus had to stay in the car. So that's what I grew up in. My parents gave me this version of God that was alive. I grew up believing that Jesus wanted to have a personal relationship with me. He wanted to be invested in every part of my life. In fact, as a family, we prayed about everything. We prayed about the big things. Like my parents prayed over me and said, like, we're going to pray for Beth's character and we are going to pray for Beth's purpose in life. Those are big things. And they prayed for the small things like my teeth. They prayed for everything, and that's what I grew up in. I grew up with this God who I believed cared about my teeth. I grew up with a God who I believed had a purpose and a plan for my life, unique to me. I grew up in an environment where God was this being that was going to show up. And my family believed fully and truly that God would always protect us. And I really believed God would always protect us. If I was faithful to God, He was going to protect me. And I misconstrued this in my little head as a child to believe if I would just be faithful enough to God, nothing bad would ever happen to me. That's a dangerous place to be. But that's what I believed. I was faithful. I can tell you this, my parents believed in not just God, but in serving at church. And so we served as a family at church. From the moment I could do something, I was serving at church. And we did really simple things when I was a little kid. I'm old enough that back in the day, we didn't have YouTube. We had cassette tapes. And we would record the service on cassette tapes. And my job as a kid was to use this big magnet that you plugged into the wall and erase cassette tapes so they'd be blank again so we could re-record and reuse those tapes. I remember serving because my parents fully believed that it was crucial that we reach other people. I believe that still to this day. My mom was my children's leader in children's church. And then as I got older, my dad was my youth leader. Church, God was a part of my whole world. And I really did believe God was going to do these amazing things in my life. And then I entered the dumpster fire years of life, middle school. And middle school did everything it could to break me. I'm going to tell you this, if you don't see this in me now, I am kind of awkward. I'm really bubbly, like I love life, and I have always kind of been that way. But there is something about me that was just a little too awkward for middle school. And it didn't matter what circle I was in. Because here was the deal. In youth group, I was too much of a goody-goody. I loved Jesus just a little too much for the youth group crew. Weird. I was too churchy for the church kids. So I didn't fit in with those group of kids, those group of girls. And then at middle school, if there was a mean girl in my grade, they found me, and I knew I was awkward. And they pointed it out every single time. My locker was filled with tissues one time. I had my hood filled with spitballs one time. They made my life a nightmare. I hated school. And here's the deal. When you get made fun of, when you get bullied, it hurts to a place I can't even tell you where. And it messes with you as a human to believe that you really are worthless. And I accepted that. I told you I have amazing parents. And so middle school was this age where I didn't have a lot of friends. But my mom knew that I just needed my group. I just needed to find my people. I hadn't found them yet. It's okay. You haven't found them yet. She pushed me to try everything. Beth, what about softball? Beth, what about this? Beth, what about that? Beth, what about this? I don't know why, but it was like, Beth, what about band? Yeah, I think I could do band. I don't even know why. So in 7th grade, I joined band. Now, I don't know how many of you guys were in band, so I'm going to tell you a little something about band. I'm going to take a drink first. So in band, you are ranked. In band, where you sit matters a lot. First chair is the best person in the band. And then from there, it goes first, second, third, all the way to the end. And if you are the last chair in a section, you can be confident that you are, in fact, the worst in your section. So I started band in 7th grade, so I knew coming in, I knew what spot I was going to sit in. I was going to sit in the last chair, confirming what I already knew about myself, which was that I was, in fact, the worst. Hold on, though, because what I didn't know that first day of band was a kid named Carl. I sat down in band feeling worthless, believing I'm worthless. And I sat in the second, next to the second worst kid in the trumpet section named Carl. And I sat down and he looked at me, he's like, hey, guess what? What? Well, you know what? We're the worst in the band. Isn't it the best? What? I had never met Carl before. We were in the same grade. Carl was a high potential kid. He is super smart. And so I'm like a little average. I'm an average student. I was always an average student. I did well in the average classes. But Carl was way smart. So our two worlds didn't combine a lot. I had no idea who Carl was, but my first impression was like, okay, dude. But Carl, every single day, would come in. He's like, guess what? Beth, nobody thinks we're going to do good. So the only thing we can ever do is be better than what people think of us. That's the only option we have. Because everyone already thinks we're going to suck, I guess. And what Carl did for me was he brought me into this little group of friends who were all geeks. They were all little high potential geeks, and they knew it. And they didn't care. They laughed at it. They loved it. I needed to love me, the little geeky, awkward me. And he gave me that opportunity. He gave me a set of friends. So because we were all these little geeky people that existed, we thought that not only did we want each other to know we were okay with this, we were going to step it up a notch so that everyone could know we were geeky. We joined marching band. And this is where geeks unite. It is the greatest place in the whole world. Marching band gave me my people. It was all people who were a little bit awkward, who didn't really fit in, but they didn't care about the social structure of school. They didn't care about being cool or popular. They didn't care about those things. They just wanted to have fun. Marching band was so much fun. I loved it. And marching band gave me my friends, and marching band kids are the nerdiest people you could possibly meet, but they want to have fun. This is marching band kids for you. Hastings used to be the Raiders, but we were a raccoon. I don't know who chose that as the mascot, but that is for sure what we were. So we had the raccoon at Pep Fest. So one of the marching band kids dug through the old storage and found a 1950s, 1960s version of the raccoon, which looked like a ferret. It was brown and looked like a ferret. And we convinced two marching band geeks to duke it out at the Pep Fest to see which mascot would work. A raccoon and a ferret fake wrestled at the Pep Fest. So that's the kind of shenanigans that marching band geeks get into. So my life was really good. I have a lot of friends, because marching band at that time was 100 kids. I have 100 friends. Everyone is friends with everyone. And every weekend, they were either at our house, or my mom was like, if there's one more party at my house, I'm going to freak out, Beth. They have to go somewhere else. So I always had people to hang out with. My sophomore year of high school, I was driven home every day by my friend Corey. Life was awesome. I had all the things around me that I needed. And it's crazy about finding your place and finding your niche, and then all of a sudden something comes screeching, halting, there's an issue. So in 1998, this is what happens for me. So in 1998, I'm at the height of my sophomore year, living life to the fullest. We are going to Florida, and we're going to march as a marching band in the happiest place on earth, Disney World. Right? Woo, this is amazing. We have practice 2 days a week to make sure that we are ready for this, and we start in January. Spring break is not until March. January 27th, we have a practice from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. At 9 p.m., my friend Carl drives me home because my parents said it was best if I could find a ride home. I did not understand this as a teenager. I understand it as a parent. So Carl gave me a ride home. It is in my driveway that I have a very unique conversation that meant nothing to me at the time. But this is how it went. Carl says, hey, Beth, I'm not going to be in school tomorrow. Why? Do you not feel good? No, I feel okay. Your mom's not going to let you stay home. Beth, I'm not going to be in school tomorrow. Goodbye. What? You're being weird right now. I will see you tomorrow because your mom's not going to let you stay home. I jump out of the car, shut the door, go to bed, don't think anything of it. I have band first hour with Carl. At this point, Carl is chair, the first chair. I am second chair right after Carl. Carl didn't come to school that day. And I was just like, I looked at the other trumpets and I was like, oh, must have been right. Like, he told me he wasn't going to be here today. And all of a sudden, the counselors start walking into the room. Well, that's not good. And they take our band instructor into his office, and we hear audible noises of crying out, of oh no's. That's not good. And that band always has like 100 kids in it. It's never quiet. It was dead silent. And a counselor comes to the front and says, hey, last night, Carl died. That is all the words they give. And we know in that moment that Carl took his own life. Because they always tell you the reason, but not when someone takes their life. And here's me. I am who I am, always. I don't cry, because I don't really know how to process it, so I don't cry. But I do see all my friends in band crying, and so I go to them. And the counselors had told us, hey, come down to the counseling office if you need, if you're good friends with him, if you need to talk to somebody. And I was like, okay, well, I see my friends are crying, so they need to go to the counseling office. That's what I can do. That's what I should do. I should walk my friends to the counseling office. And so I would walk them as they're crying on me. We walked down. And I went back to the band room, I think 3 times, to go get different sets of friends to make sure that everybody was coming down. But I didn't cry. I can't even really tell you why. But I do remember this. After about an hour of just like sitting with very emotional teenagers in the counseling office, the counselors were like, hey, if you would like to go home, you can call your parents. And so I called my mom, who I knew was at home. And I'm like, Mom, hey, can you come pick me up? Carl died. And I hear her go, Carl? Like the guy who drove you home last night? And that's when I lost it. Because what came flooding into my head, Beth, I'm not going to be in school tomorrow. You have no idea how much that hurt. I was in a car alone with a friend who knew he was going home to take his life. And in a small way, had told me. And this is where my first problem with God came, because God knew. I served a God that was all-knowing. God knew. God knew and did nothing. What in the world, God? You couldn't have like made me think like, why? Why are you staying home? Why are you doing this? I couldn't have pushed a little harder. You couldn't have maybe made it more obvious for me, or maybe just spared me this person in the first place if you knew 2 years from him being everything I needed. And I couldn't, he was my hope. I needed him. He told me I was a person worth knowing. I was a person worth having hope. And I couldn't be that for him. He saved my life, and I could be nothing for him. Thanks a lot. So life generally doesn't get kinder, nor did it for me. Because although this thing happened with Carl, and I'm reeling from this thing with Carl, I had a teacher. I had a teacher who noticed that her sophomore class was reeling. And so she decided we were going to do something fun. And this teacher was already somebody who I had given some things that I had done for creative writing, and she had inspired me and been like, yeah, keep writing. You're actually a really good writer. Keep at it. And she was somebody who had gotten cancer in the beginning of the school year. And she meant so much to me that I rallied our class and we collected money. We got her flowers and a card. And we used one of the principals to get it to her because she was so sick she couldn't come to school. And this teacher was trying to make the best of it for us. And we were acting out King Arthur's Round Table. I got the part of Guinevere, which if you don't know is a huge part in that play. I was so excited. It was something to look forward to. And 2 weeks to the day that Carl took his life, that teacher was arrested. She was arrested for an inappropriate relationship with a student in my grade. Then, while she is sitting in her jail cell, do you know what else they reveal? That woman never, ever had cancer. A woman I thought was building into me was a liar and a manipulator, and she had lied and manipulated to me. She had lied and manipulated to a student whose life she destroyed. And 2 weeks later, my life is scrambling. Are you kidding me, God? I am, like, one of these things is a big deal. 2 of them, 2 weeks apart from each other, do you care about me at all? I was 15 years old. And I don't know if you know a lot of 15-year-olds. They are great people, but they are not emotionally mature. I was not emotionally mature. This messed with me. I didn't know how to talk about it because what do? Like, I'm grieving. Grief is a messed up process. Anybody who's gone through grief, it isn't this like easy to tackle thing. It's a big, ugly thing. And then I had a liar and this complication with my teacher. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to talk about it. I was angry a lot. I was not myself. I think if you were to ask my parents, like, they knew something was up but didn't know how to deal with it either. And so they just let me come to them. The one thing I knew how to do was just cry in the middle of the night because at least then I could let it all out. So that's what I would do. And the next thing I would do is I would when my family was all gone, we live on the top of a hill, and there's this back part where there's tons of rocks and tons of pine cones, and I would just be so angry at God because I was like, God, why? Why? God, I've read all these stories. Like, a dude just spent like 3 days in the whale's belly and you spit him out and life went good. That wasn't my case. Why do you love all these people in the Bible? Why do you move all these things in the Bible? But for me, you're just silent. And I would throw rocks and throw pine cones down that hill, just like, thanks a lot, God. I'm glad I believe in you and trust you, so that you could do this. And here's the bummer about church, too. So I turned to some church people. Church is sometimes not the greatest place to hurt. And I know that we all mean well, but sometimes we don't help each other well. Because one of the things I was told is like, Beth, God is just trying to teach you something. What? So, in order for God to teach me something, he had to kill my friend and make my teacher a sex offender? Maybe he could use a different method, like any other method. Like, I don't know, like I served a God who can do all things, and this is the thing he does? Well, you'll see, Beth, there'll be a plan. Awesome. I'm glad that 40 years from now I'll see it in this picture. That doesn't help 15-year-old me that wants to punch you. And so in these ways, and I know that they were trying to help. It didn't come from a bad place. They were trying to help me. I do know that. But it didn't help. It felt more hurtful. And I told you before, I have good Christian parents, right? So I did know this. I was angry at God. I didn't really know what God was anymore because in my mind, it was like God went from all powerful, looking out for me, gonna protect me, to like this guy that might just own a magnifying glass who's trying to kill a bunch of ants. That's what God had become. But I did know this. I knew my parents are good Christian parents, and going to church was not going to be an option. And I have a flaw of trying to please people, so I did know that attending church would always make them happy. So I came to church willingly. They never had to fight me, but I also knew it was like I could fight them, but I was still going to lose in the end. I was still going to be here. So I came to church every Sunday. My dad is my youth leader. I told you that, right? So do you think youth group was an option? No. And again, I didn't mind going to youth group. Going to youth group means a few things, right? It means you're going to play some lame games sometimes. There's going to be a lot of cheesy jokes, and you're probably going to go to a conference or two. And so the conference we went to at the time was called Acquire the Fire. And I'm going to take a side note here for just a second. So if you have been to a Christian church at all in your lifetime before this moment, you know that Christian churches, a huge part of them is altar calls. I have seen like thousands of altar calls in my lifetime. This is the thing that we do. I grew up believing like, that's a thing some people do that works for some people. It's cheesy and lame, but it works for them. You always also know when an altar call is coming because the pastor like leads it up with a cheesy prayer, and then there's some really sappy instrumental music playing in the background, and someone's like, hey, if you have felt called to change your life today, why don't you raise your hand? Like, awesome. And I've always just kind of thought that they were just kind of cheesy. Like, I would never do that in a million years. Okay, like, never say that. Because God is also like a huge Alanis Morissette fan, apparently, because he is definitely like, isn't it ironic? Watch this. I go to Acquire the Fire. And to be honest, to this day, I don't even remember what the topic is or anything. But they do like a worship thing at the end, and you know what's coming next because like the guy is like, if you feel, and the music starts to swell. And I don't know why in that moment. I just feel this, go. Just go. Like, God, this is the lame thing that I don't want to do. Go. I go down the steps, because Mike Schuler is the youth leader at this time. So we sit in nosebleed section because we are going to be as far away from most of the people as we can. So it was a lot of stairs to get to the floor of this facility. But I get down there, and a girl named Sarah says, hey, can I pray for you? Sure. In that moment, I can't tell you what Sarah prayed for, because I didn't hear a single word Sarah said. Because all of a sudden in my heart, I hear a story. Hey, Beth, I'm sorry. I'm sorry this year hurt. And if I could choose anything, I wouldn't let it hurt. And it hurt my heart when Carl chose what Carl chose. And I cried with you. You didn't ever cry alone. And it broke my heart. It made my heart angry when Miss File did what she did. And then as I sat in that moment and just felt loved for the first time in a long time, I started to see these little things. I cried, I told you, at 1 a.m. But what I started to see was how many times my dad came and sat on my bed. How many times my dad talked about his dad dying and what grief looked like for him. And I started to hear God say, see, I didn't leave you alone. I sent your dad. And then I started to see that first phone call that I made to my mom. And my mom came instantaneously, as fast as that woman could get to the high school. She got there. And when she picked me up, we took the long way home. So I could just cry in the car and talk it through and ask my questions and feel my feels. And when we pulled into the driveway, she hugged me, the tightest hug. And I heard God say, see, I knew you needed it. I sent your mom. And I saw the ways that God had been present in this moment, because I saw the Lisa Larsons who had reached out. And I saw the ways that other friends had joined around me. I had never been to counseling in my whole life previous to that moment. And God sent a counselor, Mrs. Anderson, who let me yell at her. My senior year, I looked at Miss Anderson and gave her a hug, and I said, I needed to yell at someone, and I didn't know who to yell at. And you let me yell at you. Because I was angry, not because you deserved it. God was there. And what's crazy about moments like this was I throughout that year of dealing with grief and dealing with these different things, God had gotten so small because I had made him so small, because I had questioned all the whys. Why didn't you show up? Why didn't you do this? So in this conference, they had the option to go on mission trips. And I'm going to give you, if you are a young parent, I'm going to give you a little parenting tip right here. So I had decided I want to go on a mission trip for a month. Here's a parenting tip. If you don't want your kids to do something, but you don't want to have to say no, you say this: let's pray about it. That's like Christian mom for, I don't think so, lady. So that's what my mom and dad said. Okay, let's pray about it. Okay. And I prayed about it every single day. Dear Heavenly Father, change my parents' mind. Amen. So it turns out they were not okay with a month with an organization they did not know. But they were okay with 2 weeks. They dug into everything you can know about an organization. And I went to El Salvador for 2 weeks. Chances, you just get placed with somebody. I got placed with 2 youth groups, one from Florida and one from Kentucky, and then me. So when I first met them all, they were super, super nice. They included me in a lot of things, but they all have these inside jokes with each other that obviously I don't. And there was a lot of processes to getting down to El Salvador that kind of went wonky and weird. And all of a sudden I just was like, okay, God, I thought you asked me to come with you, and now I'm trusting you. And you said you were going to show me how big you are, and now I'm all alone with these 2 youth groups that keep asking me to say, hey, say Minnesota again. I know I say the O's weird, but I don't know how to say it any other way. Minnesota. And I don't see my O, or I don't hear my O's until I'm with all of you guys who keep saying all y'all, which is a silly phrase. And whooping. Say whooping all the time. What does whooping even mean anymore? You're going to whoop me? Okay. But when I got to El Salvador, when we got off the plane and we got to the first church, we all had to wear name tags. My full name is Elizabeth. So my name tag said Elizabeth. And God, in just like the coolest way ever, to say, hey, I picked this place for you. I picked this time for you. The first person I meet at the church is a little girl this tall, whose name is Elizabeth. Elizabeth speaks no words of English. I speak no words of Spanish, but we had the same name, and the 2 of us became best friends. God sent me a little 5-year-old to remind me in that moment that he has a purpose and a plan for my life, that it had started well before me, because it wasn't by any random chance An Elizabeth was there who was super excited to meet an Elizabeth. And me and Elizabeth basically communicated through a game we called Como se dice, which is just how do you say in Spanish. And we would play Como se dice, and we would point to something in the room. Como se dice. And she would say it in Spanish, and I would say, no, 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 you say it. Like, head, no. And she would say it in Spanish, and we'd go back and forth and tease each other. That was my entrance into El Salvador, and El Salvador rocked my world. I had taken a huge step in being the loner, all by myself, no safety nets around me, and God showed me healings, and God showed me faith, and God showed me what it means to trust him fully and take a step into places, and God opened my eyes to how powerful and true he really was. And 1 year later, I went to Carl's, to the cemetery. I hate cemeteries, hate them. But I went to go put a letter on Carl's headstone. And in that 1 year, God had shown me how faithful he was. And I promised Carl, I don't know that I ever told you you were my hope in 8th grade. And I'm so sorry. But I promise you never again will anybody be in my life and make a difference in my life and me not tell them. And that's what I will have learned from this story. And very often on the anniversary of Carl's passing, I will write letters to people just to remember, hey, you are important. You have a purpose and a plan. You are worth a whole lot because you have touched my life. And although I don't think God chose a suicide, I don't think God chose a sex offender to somehow make something happen in my life, I do know God used it anyways. And I'm not special. God wants to use you too. And I am sorry for the things that have hurt you. And I am sorry if I was one of the people that said God's going to work it out for good when that hurt. Because I know I serve a God who loves, who has an Elizabeth in your story, who has a mom who wants to give you a hug. And maybe it's your mom, or maybe it's somebody in here. But the story doesn't end with a heartache. So, I am going to do that really cheesy thing. I'm going to put the microphone down. I'm going to stand over here in this corner. And if you want someone to just pray for you, I'm going to be there until nobody else wants to come. Sound good? Thank you for listening to my story today.